Every successful organization has processes, but are standardized processes always more efficient? Do detailed procedures guarantee consistent results? And can standardization sometimes make an organization worse? All right, let's see how sharp you really are. 10 questions, no hints, no second chances. I'll give you the statement. You decide, fact or fiction. Think fast, trust your instincts, and keep score, because the difference between a strong process and a dangerous one is not always obvious. Ready? Let's test your knowledge. Question 1. Here's your first statement. Process standardization means establishing a consistent, repeatable method for completing a particular type of work. The answer is fact. This is true. Process standardization creates an agreed method for performing recurring work. It can define the required steps, responsibilities, controls, decision points, expected outputs, and evidence that must be retained. The objective is not simply to make everyone behave identically. It is to reduce unnecessary variation and ensure that important work is performed consistently, even when different people, departments, or locations are involved. For example, a standardized customer complaint process might define how complaints are recorded, categorized, investigated, escalated, and resolved. Without that shared method, two customers reporting the same problem could receive completely different levels of service. Standardization gives an organization a dependable operational baseline. Question 2. Next statement. Standardizing a process means employees are no longer permitted to use their professional judgment. The answer is fiction. This sounds believable, but it is not accurate. A well-designed standard does not eliminate judgment. It identifies where judgment is appropriate and establishes boundaries for using it responsibly. Some activities should be tightly controlled. A required identity check, safety inspection, or regulatory approval should not be skipped because someone prefers a different approach. But many situations cannot be handled by a rigid script. An experienced employee may need to interpret unusual circumstances, respond to a vulnerable customer, or escalate a risk that does not fit neatly into a predefined category. The strongest processes distinguish between mandatory controls and areas where informed judgment is expected. Standardization should support good decisions, not replace human thinking. Question 3. Let's continue. Once a process has been documented in a detailed procedure, consistent performance is guaranteed. The answer is fiction. A documented procedure is important, but documentation alone does not guarantee performance. Employees must be able to find the procedure, understand it, and apply it under real operating conditions. They may also need training, appropriate systems, sufficient time, and clear accountability. A 40-page procedure stored in a forgotten folder may technically exist while having almost no influence on daily work. Organizations must also verify whether the documented process matches what employees actually do. That requires observation, operational data, quality reviews, control testing, and feedback from the people performing the work. A process is not standardized merely because somebody wrote it down. It becomes standardized when the expected method is understood, practical, consistently followed, and regularly evaluated. Question 4. Pay attention to this one. When a process produces inconsistent results, the best first response is to add more detailed steps and approvals. The answer is fiction. Adding more steps can create the appearance of control without addressing the real problem. Inconsistency might be caused by unclear responsibilities, poor training, unreliable data, difficult systems, conflicting targets, or a process that was badly designed from the beginning. Adding another checklist or approval can increase delays while leaving the underlying cause untouched. It may even create new handoffs, and every unnecessary handoff introduces another opportunity for confusion, error, or lost information. Before adding controls, the organization should examine where variation occurs and why. The right solution might be a clearer decision rule, better system validation, removal of duplicate work, or improved employee training. More procedure does not automatically mean more control. Sometimes the smartest standardization decision is to simplify. Question 5. We're halfway there. Process standardization can make automation easier and more reliable. The answer is fact. This is true. Automation works best when inputs, rules, decision points, and expected outputs are clearly defined. If 5 employees complete the same activity in 5 completely different ways, automating that activity becomes difficult and potentially dangerous. Standardization helps identify what should happen, in what sequence, and under which conditions. But there is an important warning. Organizations should not automate a process simply because it can be automated. If the underlying process contains duplication, unnecessary approvals, or outdated requirements, automation may only allow the organization to perform bad work faster. The process should first be examined, simplified, and controlled. Standardize what makes sense. Then automate what creates genuine value. Question 6. Let's raise the difficulty. A standardized process should be performed identically in every country, department, and situation. The answer is fiction. Consistency does not always require complete uniformity. Different locations may face different laws, languages, customer expectations, technologies, or operational risks. A global organization might standardize the purpose of a process, its minimum controls, and its required outcome while allowing approved local variations. For example, every office may be required to verify a customer's identity, but the acceptable documents and regulatory checks could differ by country. The key is controlled variation. Local differences should be justified, documented, approved, and reviewed. If every team can change the process whenever it wants, the standard loses its value. But if legitimate differences are prohibited, employees may be forced to ignore local realities or create unofficial workarounds. Strong standardization protects the common core while accommodating necessary exceptions. Question 7. This one catches people off guard. The organization's most experienced employees should be allowed to ignore standardized procedures if their personal method produces good results. The answer is fiction. Experience is valuable, but consistent results should not depend on one person's undocumented method. An experienced employee may have discovered a better way to perform the work. If so, that method should be examined, tested, and when appropriate, incorporated into the standard process. Simply allowing high performers to work outside the process creates hidden dependency. If they leave, take extended absence, or move to another role, their knowledge may disappear with them. It can also make training, quality assurance, and auditability much more difficult. The goal is not to suppress expertise. It is to convert individual expertise into organizational knowledge. A mature organization learns from its strongest performers instead of building processes that only those performers understand. Question 8. Stay focused. Exceptions and workarounds are useful sources of information about whether a standardized process is working properly. The answer is fact. This is true, and it is frequently overlooked. Employees often create workarounds when an official process is too slow, unclear, impractical, or incompatible with the systems they use. Not every workaround is acceptable. Some can bypass important controls and create serious risks. But treating every exception as simple employee disobedience can hide valuable information. Repeated exceptions may reveal that the official process no longer reflects operational reality. Organizations should record and analyze them. How often do they occur? Why are they needed? Who approves them? Do they produce better outcomes or introduce greater risk? A workaround may be a warning that a process is broken. It may also contain the first version of a better process. Question 9. Almost there. A highly standardized process can increase operational risk if it is not regularly reviewed and updated. The answer is fact. This is absolutely true. Standardization makes behavior repeatable, but it does not guarantee that the repeated behavior remains correct. Laws change, technology changes, customer expectations change, products, risks, and business models change. If an outdated process is followed consistently, the organization may reproduce the same mistake hundreds or thousands of times. That is one of the hidden dangers of standardization. An informal error might affect one transaction. A standardized error can affect every transaction. Each important process should therefore have an owner, an approval history, and a defined review cycle. Changes in regulations, systems, incidents, customer complaints, and performance data should also trigger earlier reviews when necessary. Consistency is valuable only when the standard itself remains fit for purpose. Question 10. This is the final question, and it's the one that surprises most people. The strongest standardized process is not the one with the most rules. It is the one that can produce consistent outcomes, manage legitimate exceptions, and improve when new information becomes available. The answer is fact. This is the central lesson of process standardization. A strong process establishes a stable and controlled way of working, but it is not frozen forever. It defines the expected outcome, required controls, responsibilities, decision points, and minimum evidence. It also explains what should happen when normal conditions do not apply. Who can approve an exception? When must an issue be escalated? How is the decision documented? Who determines whether the exception reveals a wider process problem? The best standards also contain a feedback loop. Performance data, customer complaints, errors, near misses, employee observations, and audit findings should all contribute to continuous improvement. Without control, flexibility becomes inconsistency. But without learning, standardization becomes rigidity. The strongest process creates consistency where consistency matters, permits controlled judgment where judgment is necessary, and evolves when the evidence shows that a better method exists. Process standardization is not about forcing people to follow rules. It is about creating a reliable system in which people can perform good work again and again. All right, how did you do? Drop your score in the comments and tell us which statement caught you off guard. Be honest. 8 or more? You understand that standardization is about much more than writing procedures. Less than that? Now you know what many organizations discover only after something goes wrong. Hit like, subscribe, and share this challenge with someone who works in operations, servicing, compliance, or process improvement. And come back for the next Servicingpedia challenge. Because knowing more is how you stay ahead.